First Contact's Mockery. Admiral Sarah Chen stood at attention before the towering crystalline archways of the Zetheran High Council chamber, trying not to let her frustration show. The massive chamber, with its sweeping spires of iridescent crystal and pulsing bioorganic displays, seemed designed to make visitors feel small and insignificant. The air itself carried a slight electric charge that made her skin tingle beneath her environmental suit. "So," drawled High Chancellor Vexterra, his translucent scales shifting through shades of azure and gold as he looked down at the human delegation. "These are the primitives who have been making so much noise at our borders." His 3 sets of eyes blinked in lazy succession as scattered laughter echoed from the assembled Zetheran nobles. Chen kept her voice steady. "The United Earth Federation comes seeking peaceful diplomatic relations and mutual exchange of knowledge, High Chancellor." "Knowledge." Vexterra's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "What knowledge could you possibly offer the Zetheran Empire? Your species barely managed to achieve faster-than-light travel a mere century ago. We mastered the quantum fold when your ancestors were still fighting over scraps of metal." "With respect," Chen replied, "humanity has made remarkable advances in theoretical physics, particularly in the field of dimensional mechanics. We believe our research could benefit." "Enough." The Chancellor rose from his crystalline throne, his ceremonial robes catching the light in mesmerizing patterns. "Let me show you something, Admiral Chen." He gestured, and the chamber's walls became transparent, revealing the sprawling Zetheran capital city below. Massive structures of living crystal stretched toward the violet sky, while streams of energy flowed like rivers between buildings. "This," he continued, "is true civilization. Our youngest children grasp concepts your greatest scientists struggle to comprehend. Your crude attempts at language barely qualify as communication compared to our quantum-resonant thought speech. Yet you stand here, believing you have something to offer us." Dr. James Rodriguez, the delegation's chief linguist, stepped forward. "Your Excellency, if I may, we've studied the public records of Zetheran language development. The mathematical patterns in your communication systems show fascinating parallels to—" Silence. The Chancellor's scales flashed crimson. "You dare to suggest your primitive linguistic analysis has any relevance to our evolved methods of communication? This audience is concluded. Return to your limited world, humans. When you have spent a few thousand years advancing beyond your current state of barbarism, perhaps we will reconsider." As guards moved to escort them out, Chen noticed something odd. A younger Zetheran noble, scales shimmering with patterns that marked her as part of the scientific caste, was staring at Dr. Rodriguez's datapad with unusual intensity. Their eyes met briefly, and Chen caught a glimpse of something unexpected in those alien eyes: curiosity. Back aboard the UEF flagship Prometheus, Chen paced in her private quarters. "They're hiding something, James. Did you see how quickly they shut you down when you mentioned analyzing their language patterns?" Rodriguez nodded, bringing up holographic displays of his research. The reaction was definitely excessive. "And there's something else." He manipulated the display, showing complex mathematical models. "Their quantum-resonant thought speech. It's not as unique as they claim. The basic patterns show remarkable similarities to ancient human communication systems, particularly some pre-Sumerian scripts we've discovered." "That's impossible," Chen frowned. Unless what we know about both our histories isn't entirely accurate," Rodriguez finished. "Admiral, I need permission to pursue this research." Quietly, Chen studied the swirling patterns in the display. "Do it. But be careful. I suspect the Zetherans won't take kindly to anyone questioning their supposed superiority." She gazed out at the crystalline planet below. "And James, I want you to focus particularly on their oldest colonial worlds. If there's something they're trying to hide, that's where we'll find it." As the Prometheus prepared to depart Zetheran space, Chen couldn't shake the feeling that they'd stumbled onto something far bigger than a simple diplomatic rejection. In the privacy of her quarters, she recorded a message to Earth Command. First contact with the Zetheran Empire has failed on the surface. But I believe we've discovered something that could change everything. We think we know about human origins, and perhaps the Zetherans as well. Request permission to initiate Operation Deep Archive. Something tells me we're about to rewrite history. Little did the Zetherans know, their dismissal of humanity would be the catalyst for a discovery that would shake their empire to its foundations. The game of proving human worth had begun, but it would soon become a race to uncover a truth that neither species was fully prepared to face. The ancient library. The wind howled across the surface of Kepler 471 bits, whipping red dust against Dr. James Rodriguez's environmental suit as he carefully made his way down into the ancient ruins. This forgotten world lay at the edge of what was once Zetheran space, abandoned centuries ago according to official records. The perfect place to hide secrets. Status check. Admiral Chen's voice crackled through his comm system from orbit. Approaching the main chamber now, Rodriguez replied, his helmet lights illuminating walls covered in strange, flowing symbols. These structures predate Zetheran occupation by at least several thousand years, Sarah, and they're different from anything we've seen in their architecture. His research team had spent 3 months analyzing orbital scans before finding this site, carefully hidden in a valley that electromagnetic interference had kept off most surveys. The ruins weren't made of the Zetherans' signature living crystal. These were stone and metal, weathered by millennia of dust storms. James, you need to see this, Dr. Yuki Tanaka, his fellow linguist, called from deeper in the chamber. Her voice held an edge of excitement he hadn't heard since their discovery of the Proto-Indo-European settlement in the Caucasus years ago. Rodriguez made his way to where Tanaka stood before a vast wall covered in intricate markings. His breath caught in his throat. Sarah, are you getting this feed? Crystal clear, Chen replied. Those symbols. They're not just similar to ancient human scripts, Tanaka said, running her scanner over the wall. They're identical to the base mathematical patterns we found in the Indus Valley civilization. But these are at least 20,000 years older. Rodriguez's mind raced with implications. The symbols weren't just decorative. They formed complex equations and star charts that spoke of advanced scientific knowledge. This doesn't make sense. According to every historical record, the Zetherans evolved their written language independently on their homeworld. Unless they didn't, a new voice cut in. Rodriguez spun around to find a Zetheran standing in the chamber's entrance, scales shimmering with the patterns of the scientific cast. It was the same curious noble from the High Council chamber. I am Ixtel, she said, deactivating her personal camouflage field. And I've been waiting for humans to find this place for a very long time. Rodriguez's hand moved toward his emergency beacon, but Ixtel raised her hands in a peaceful gesture. If I wanted to stop you, the Empire's guards would already be here. I am a historian, one of the few who knows the truth about our origins. Which is? Tanaka asked, her scanner still recording everything. That the Zetheran Empire is built on a lie. Ixtel moved closer, her scales shifting to deep purple, a sign of emotional intensity. These ruins aren't just similar to your ancient sites. They're part of the same civilization, a civilization that seeded both our species across the stars. Chen's voice cut in sharply. We've got multiple ships dropping out of quantum space. Ixtel, are you sure you weren't followed? The Zetheran's scales paled. They must have traced my jump signature. Quick, the truth must survive. Everything you need to know is encoded in the central spire. The key is in the mathematical sequence that both our species independently discovered. The Fibonacci spiral. Security teams incoming, Chen warned. James, Yuki, you've got 3 minutes before they breach your position. Rodriguez's fingers flew over his data pad, scanning everything in sight, while Tanaka uploaded their findings to the Prometheus. Ixtel moved to the chamber's entrance, her scales shifting to match the stone walls. I will delay them. Your species deserves to know the truth. about all of us. Come with us, Rodriguez offered, but Ixtel shook her head. I serve my people better by remaining within the Empire. There are others like me, waiting for the right moment. What you discover here will give us the proof we need. She pressed something into Rodriguez's hand. A crystal data core. This contains locations of other sites. Find them all. Human. Help us remember who we truly are. The sound of approaching vehicles echoed through the ruins. Time's up, Chen ordered. Get to the extraction point now. As Rodriguez and Tanaka rushed through the ancient corridors, clutching their precious data, the linguist's mind was already racing ahead. The symbols, the mathematics, the impossible similarities. It all pointed to something that would shake both civilizations to their core. Back aboard the Prometheus, as they jumped to safety through quantum space, Rodriguez studied the crystal Ixtel had given him. Within its lattice structure, he could see the same patterns they'd found in the ruins, patterns that appeared in humanity's oldest writings, in the fundamental mathematics both species had discovered, in the very language the Zetherans now used to claim superiority. Sarah, he said quietly, I don't think we're just rewriting history anymore. We're about to rediscover our common origin. And I have a feeling the Zetheran Empire will do anything to stop us from sharing it with both our worlds. Chen nodded grimly. Then we better make sure we have ironclad proof before we go public. Plot a course to the next set of coordinates. Let's see what other secrets our ancient ancestors left for us to find. As the Prometheus disappeared into quantum space, their discovery was already sending ripples through the Empire. On a dozen worlds, hidden scholars and truth seekers began preparing for the moment when the foundations of their society would be shaken. The race to uncover the truth had begun, and the fate of two civilizations hung in the balance. Breaking the code, the holographic symbols danced before Dr. Rodriguez's tired eyes, their patterns shifting and realigning as the quantum computer processed another permutation. 3 weeks had passed since their discovery on Kepler 471 bits, and the Prometheus had been running silent through the outer sectors, staying one step ahead of Zetheran pursuit while the research team worked to decrypt the ancient messages. The mathematical foundations are solid, Dr. Tanaka said, manipulating a three-dimensional representation of the script. Look at how the Fibonacci sequence appears not just in the structure of the symbols, but in the very spacing between words. It's like they encoded universal mathematical truths into the language itself. Rodriguez nodded, rubbing his eyes. A language designed to be decipherable by any species that achieved mathematical literacy. Our ancestors were brilliant. Admiral Chen entered the research lab, her usual composed demeanor showing signs of strain. We've got company. 3 Zetheran dreadnoughts just dropped out of quantum space in the neighboring sector. We need results, people. We're close, Rodriguez said, pulling up the latest analysis. The crystal data core Ixtel gave us contained more than just coordinates. It's a key, a primer for understanding the ancient script. Look at this. He gestured, and a holographic display expanded to show parallel texts. Ancient human scripts alongside early Zetheran writings. The similarities aren't just superficial. Both writing systems evolved from this earlier language, preserving core mathematical relationships even as the symbols changed over time. Like linguistic DNA, Tanaka added excitedly. We can trace the evolutionary path from this ancient script to both modern human languages and Zetheran quantum resonant speech. They're both descendants of the same parent language. A warning klaxon blared through the ship. Multiple quantum signatures detected. The AI announced, Zetheran vessels on intercept course. Chen's hand went to her command console. How much more time do you need? The computer's processing the final decryption sequence now, Rodriguez said, fingers flying over the controls. There's something else in this data, Sarah. References to a place. Some kind of central repository of knowledge. If we can find it. The ship shuddered as quantum torpedoes detonated nearby. All hands, battle stations, Chen ordered. James, Yuki, make it quick. The next few minutes were tense as the Prometheus executed a series of complex evasive maneuvers while the computer worked. Then suddenly, the holographic display erupted with new information, pages upon pages of translated text. "Got it," Tanaka exclaimed. "The ancient language, it's beautiful." They called themselves the Precedents. They weren't just spacefaring. They were quantum engineers who understood the fabric of reality itself. Rodriguez was already scanning through the translations. According to this, they seeded colonies across thousands of worlds, using quantum engineering to adapt their descendants for different environments. That's why there are so many humanoid species in the galaxy, where all their children, shaped by their technology, and left to develop independently. But why? Chen asked, even as she coordinated the ship's defenses. Why split their civilization? Some kind of catastrophe was coming, Rodriguez read. They knew they couldn't survive it as a unified civilization, so they scattered their children across the stars, encoding their knowledge into our very languages and mathematics, waiting for the day we'd be ready to reclaim our heritage. He looked up. The Zetherans didn't evolve naturally to their current state. Their ancestors were engineered for their crystalline world, just as our ancestors were engineered for Earth. Another impact rocked the ship. Shield integrity at 60%. The AI warned. The repository, Chen pressed. Where is it? Rodriguez's eyes widened as he decoded the final coordinates. It's on the Zetheran homeworld itself, deep beneath their capital city. That's why they built there. Some part of their racial memory drew them to that location. No wonder they're so desperate to stop us, Tanaka said. This knowledge doesn't just prove we're equals. It proves we're literally family. The ship lurched as another quantum torpedo struck home. We've got more company, Chen announced grimly. A whole battle fleet just jumped in. We can't take them all. Rodriguez clutched the crystal data core, mind racing. We don't have to. Ixtel said there were others in the Empire who suspected the truth. If we can broadcast this data on all frequencies, they'll intercept it, Chen warned. Not if we use their own quantum-resonant communication methods against them, Tanaka interjected. The patterns in the ancient language, they're the key to their entire communication network. We can piggyback our signal through their own systems. Chen's eyes narrowed as she considered the options. Do it, but we'll only have one shot before they adapt their frequencies. As Rodriguez and Tanaka worked frantically to encode their discovery into a quantum-resonant signal, the Prometheus engaged in an elaborate dance with death, weaving through space as dozens of Zetheran ships attempted to box them in. Signal ready, Rodriguez announced. Shields at 40%. The AI updated. Hull breach on deck 7. Chen's finger hovered over the broadcast control. Let's show our distant cousins what their ancestors left for them to find. Transmit. The signal burst forth, riding the quantum frequencies the Zetherans used for their thought speech. In that moment, as the truth of their shared heritage propagated across space at faster than light speeds, Rodriguez thought of Ixtel and the other hidden scholars in the Empire. The truth was out now, but what would their cousins do with it? Multiple ships powering down weapons, the AI reported, receiving transmission from the Zetheran flagship. Put it through, Chen ordered. The voice that came through was familiar. Ix telephone, Prometheus, hold position. The High Council is in chaos. The truth, it's spreading faster than they can contain it. But this is just the beginning. The repository still waits to be found, and there are those who would still destroy everything to keep their power. Chen looked at Rodriguez and Tanaka, then back at the tactical display showing dozens of Zetheran ships in varying states of confusion and conflict. Well, she said with a grim smile, I guess it's time to plan a family reunion. Truth and deception. The crystalline spires of the Zetheran capital sparkled like frozen fire in the light of the setting sun. From her hiding place in the lower districts, Ixtel watched security forces rushing through the streets, their scales pulsing with agitated patterns. The truth broadcast by the Prometheus had shattered 5 centuries of carefully maintained order in just 3 days. The ruling council has declared martial law, she subvocalized through her quantum link to the hidden human team. They're claiming the broadcast was human psychological warfare. How many believe them? Admiral Chen's voice came back, transmitted from where the Prometheus lurked at the edge of the system. Fewer by the hour. The mathematical proofs in your transmission were elegant. Our scientists couldn't deny them even if they wanted to. Ixtel's scales rippled with what humans would recognize as bitter amusement. It turns out quantum-resonant thought speech is excellent for spreading verifiable mathematical truths. In a secured basement laboratory beneath the surface, Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Tanaka worked with a group of sympathetic Zetheran scientists, their environmental suits necessary in the crystal-saturated atmosphere. They were analyzing data from deep scanning equipment, searching for the ancient repository. The High Council built their palace here for a reason, explained Kavor, a Zetheran archaeologist who had long harbored doubts about the official history. Our oldest legends speak of the place where wisdom sleeps. We thought it was metaphorical. It's real, Rodriguez said, adjusting the scanning frequency. The precedents left repositories of their knowledge on dozens of worlds, but this was meant to be their masterwork, the complete record of their civilization, their technologies, their reasons for separating us. A warning tone sounded through the facility. Security forces approaching, the lab's AI announced. Multiple heavy weapons detected. They're panicking. Ixtel's voice came through the comm. High Chancellor Vexterra is personally leading a purge of the scientific caste. Anyone suspected of accepting the human data is being arrested, or worse. Tanaka looked up from her calculations. We're close to pinpointing the repository's location, but we need more time. Time is something we don't have, Chen replied. We're detecting multiple battle fleets converging on the capital. Some appear to be rebel factions supporting the truth, others loyal to the High Council. This could turn into a civil war. Rodriguez shared a look with Kavor. We can't let that happen. The repository wasn't meant to divide us. It was meant to reunite us. The council chamber, Kavor said suddenly, his scales shifting to the deep blue of revelation. The crystalline throne itself. We always assumed it was a symbol of our mastery over living crystal. But what if? Rodriguez was already recalibrating his scanners. The throne room is directly above the strongest energy readings. They didn't just build their palace over the repository. They built their seat of power on top of it. Ixtel, Chen's voice was sharp with urgency. Can you get them into the High Council chamber? Not subtly, the Zetheran replied. But perhaps subtlety is no longer what we need. Her scales shifted to a pattern that indicated deep resolution. There are thousands gathering in the streets now, demanding answers. The common people know something has been hidden from them. If we move now, openly. A massive explosion rocked the city. On their sensors, they could see ships exchanging fire in orbit. Decision made, Chen announced. We're detecting multiple ships launching orbital strikes. Whoever controls that repository controls the future of both our species. Ixtel, rally your people. We're done hiding. What followed was chaos. As rebel and loyal ships battled above, the streets erupted in protest. Ixtel led a march on the High Council chamber, her scales blazing with the patterns of truth and revelation. Behind her came thousands of Zetherans, their combined thought speech amplifying the mathematical proofs of their shared heritage with humanity. Rodriguez, Tanaka, and Kavor raced through maintenance tunnels beneath the palace, following the energy signatures that grew stronger with each step. Above them, they could hear the sounds of conflict as the High Chancellor's guards clashed with the approaching crowd. The High Council chamber is breached, Ixtel reported. But Vexterra, he's doing something to the throne. The crystal matrix is becoming unstable. He'll destroy it, Kavor realized in horror. He'll erase all trace of our true heritage rather than accept it. Rodriguez checked his readings. We're directly beneath the chamber. These walls, they're not just crystal. They're quantum processors, storing data at the subatomic level. The entire palace is part of the repository. The floor shuddered as more explosions rocked the city. Through their comms, they could hear Chen coordinating with rebel ships, trying to prevent orbital bombardment that could destroy everything. There, Tanaka pointed to a section of wall where the crystal seemed to pulse with inner light. The patterns matched exactly the mathematical sequences they'd discovered in the ancient ruins. As Rodriguez reached out to touch the crystal surface, Cavor's scales suddenly flared in warning. Wait. The quantum matrix, it's not just storing data. It's active. These crystals, they're not just processors. They're a test. A test? Tanaka asked. The precedents wouldn't want their knowledge used for dominance or destruction, Cavor explained, his scientist's mind racing ahead. They'd want proof that their children had moved beyond such things, that we could work together. Rodriguez looked at his scanner, then at his Zetheran colleague. The activation sequence. It's not responding to either of our patterns alone, but if we combine them. Above, they could hear Vextera's voice raised in fury, ordering the destruction of the throne room even as Ixtel and the protesters pushed forward. Time was running out. Together then, Rodriguez said, extending his hand. Cavor placed his scaled appendage next to it, their different forms creating a combined pattern against the crystal wall. The entire chamber began to hum with power. Light rippled through the crystalline structures, racing upward toward the throne room. Through their comms, they could hear gasps of astonishment. The throne. Ixtel's voice was filled with wonder. It's transforming. There's a message forming. As the light reached its crescendo, a voice older than either of their civilizations began to speak, using both ancient and modern tongues simultaneously. Our children have returned home, and they have finally learned to return together. Legacy of the stars. The ancient voice echoed through the crystalline chambers of the Zetheran palace, speaking in harmonics that resonated with both human and Zetheran neural patterns. As the message unfurled, the fighting in orbit gradually ceased. All eyes and sensors turned toward the phenomenon, unfolding in the High Council chamber. High Chancellor Vextera stood frozen, his scales pale with shock, as the throne he tried to destroy transformed into a towering holographic array. The crystal matrix hummed with power as images formed in the air, scenes from a civilization that had mastered the quantum nature of reality itself. We were one people, the voice continued, as Dr. Rodriguez, Dr. Tanaka, and Cavor emerged into the chamber through a maintenance access. We walked among the stars when your worlds were young. We shaped planets and engineered our own evolution. But we saw something coming, a darkness between galaxies that threatened to consume all. The holographic display showed a vast, incomprehensible phenomenon approaching ancient star systems. We could not survive as one, the message continued. Our civilization was too centralized, too perfect a target. And so we made the greatest sacrifice. We divided ourselves. We seeded our children across thousands of worlds, engineering them to thrive in different environments. We encoded our knowledge into your very languages, your mathematics, your quantum sciences. And we waited. Admiral Chen's voice came through the comm system. The fighting has stopped. Every ship in orbit is receiving the transmission. Ixtel moved forward, her scales shimmering with emotion as she watched humanity's shared past unfold before them. All this time, we thought our mastery of quantum science made us superior, but it was a gift, waiting for us to be worthy of it. The gift was not the science, the ancient voice corrected. The gift was the capacity to grow beyond division, to recognize yourselves in the other. You have proven worthy not by mastering quantum mechanics, but by choosing understanding over destruction. Vextera finally found his voice. This is impossible. We are the Zetheran Empire. We achieved our greatness through our own superiority. No, Cavor said firmly. We achieved our technological advancement because we were engineered for it, just as humans were engineered for their remarkable adaptability and innovation. Different paths to the same destination. The holographic display shifted, showing the full scope of precedent civilization, achievements that made even the Zetheran Empire's greatest works seem primitive by comparison. This knowledge is your birthright, the voice explained, but it can only be accessed together. The quantum matrices require both human and Zetheran neural patterns to fully activate. This was by design. Rodriguez stepped forward, addressing both the assembled Zetherans and the human crews in orbit. They didn't just leave us their knowledge. They left us a challenge. To grow beyond the tribalism and prejudice that threatens every advanced civilization. To recognize that our differences are our strength. The darkness still comes, the ancient voice warned, showing astronomical data that made both human and Zetheran scientists gasp. Slowly, yes, but inevitably. Your children's children will face it, but they need not face it alone. You might learn, grow. This repository contains the knowledge of fold space drives that could cross galaxies, of quantum engineering that could reshape worlds. But more importantly, it contains the wisdom to use such power wisely. Tanaka was already analyzing the data streams. The mathematical principles. They're beautiful. It's not just technology. It's a whole new way of understanding reality itself. The question, Chen's voice came through clearly, is what we do with it. All eyes turned to Vexterra. The High Chancellor stood silent for a long moment, his scales shifting through complex patterns of thought. Finally, he spoke. For 50,000 years, we believe ourselves to be the pinnacle of evolution. We built an empire on that belief. He turned to face the human delegation. But true greatness lies not in clinging to comforting lies, but in embracing difficult truths. To everyone's shock, Vexterra descended from the platform where the throne had stood. The Zetheran Empire cannot face these challenges alone. Nor can humanity. Our ancestors knew this. Perhaps it is time we remembered their wisdom. One by one, the Zetherans in the chamber began shifting their scales to a new pattern, one that combined the traditional imperial colors with frequencies that human eyes could easily perceive. A pattern of unity. There will be resistance, Ixtel warned. Centuries of belief don't change in a day. No, Rodriguez agreed. But they change through evidence, through understanding, and through choice, just as they have today. The holographic display shifted one final time, showing the vast expanse of the galaxy. Your first challenge, the ancient voice said, is not to master this knowledge, but to learn to share it. To build something greater than either of your civilizations could create alone. The darkness between galaxies comes, but if you stand together, you need not fear it. As the sun set on the Zetheran capital, humans and Zetherans began the monumental task of understanding their shared heritage. In orbit, ships that had been firing on each other just hours before now exchanged quantum data bursts, sharing sensor readings of the astronomical phenomenon their ancestors had flood. Admiral Chen stood with Rodriguez Tanaka and their Zetheran colleagues, watching teams of scientists from both species begin to work together. You know, she said thoughtfully, when we came here seeking diplomatic relations, I never imagined we'd end up discovering we were family all along. Perhaps that's true of all first contact situations, Cavor suggested, his scales shimmering with scholarly excitement. Perhaps every species we meet is another lost branch of the family, waiting to be rediscovered. As if in response, the repository began displaying star charts, marking thousands of worlds where other colonies had been seeded. Other children of the precedents, waiting to be found. Rodriguez smiled. Well then, cousins, we have a lot of family reunions to plan. Above them, the first combined fleet of human and Zetheran ships prepared to jump to quantum space. They carried with them not just the knowledge of their shared past, but the promise of a united future. The stars beckoned, and this time, they would explore them together, as their ancestors had always intended.